Hello everyone, welcome back to the classroom, where you, me, and my trusty whiteboard here go through matters pertaining to the body, heart, mind, and spirit. I'm Dr. Roshan Amnarain, and class is in session. Today, we're going to have a really interesting talk, one that's been requested by a very special viewer. And today, we're going to talk about finding forgiveness. I'm going to try to break this concept down because this to me is one of the most important virtues a human being can carry. I'm even going to say it. I think that actually forgiveness might very well be more important than love itself. And there, I said it. And perhaps the reason being is because, for me, love is a state of being. Love is something that happens, and it's something that we carry within us, almost effortlessly. Now, I'm just talking generally speaking, not talking about specific kinds of love. But more or less, love is a state of being, a place that we find ourselves. And it's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. Forgiveness, however, requires a journey. Forgiveness, first of all, for us to find forgiveness must mean that we've found ourselves in a deep, dark hole of negative thoughts and emotions that we must attempt to bring ourselves out of that. And that ascent, that redemption, to me, brings a lot more personal growth than love itself. And again, I'm just trying to compare and contrast love and forgiveness. I'm not knocking love in any way, shape, or form. But I'm trying to just impress upon you guys how important it is to be able to find that forgiveness. So for the purposes of relaying such a complex and almost amorphous concept to you guys in a way that I can sort of rationalize, I'm going to break up today's lecture into two parts. We're going to talk about forgiving others, and we're going to talk about forgiving ourselves. I find forgiving others to be much more easier than forgiving ourselves. So let's talk about forgiving others first. And to break this down, it's one of two things. If we have to forgive someone, the emotion that is raised within us that we must antidote is fairly simple. The emotion that we need to antidote is the emotion of resentment. Resentment is the emotion that we feel when we feel as if we've been treated wrongly, when we feel like we've been wronged. This is the emotion that we feel. It's a very close emotion to anger, but resentment is in particular in response to when we've been wronged in some way, shape, or form. And I will break this down further into two. So if someone has either deliberately, or non-deliberately wronged us. So let's go with the easier one first. If it's non-deliberately, there's a very, very, very simple antidote for that. It's simple in concept, but very, very hard to actually master. The antidote for non-deliberate wrong, if somebody wrongs us non-deliberately, is to not take it personally. Super easy to say, but extremely hard to actually do. And you know, I love to give the example of someone giving us a bad drive on the road. And so let's say, for instance, someone gives us a bad drive on the road, which perfectly sums up someone wronging us non-deliberately. Because that person didn't wake up this morning and say to themselves, you see that person there? I'm going to give them a bad drive on the road. For whatever their reason, whether they were in a hurry, whether they had a pregnant wife in the car, whether they had a serious case of diarrhea, they happened to come into contact with you, and they give you a bad drive on the road. The fact is, it was not personal. Now, at the end of the day, they did put your life in some element of danger. They did make you uncomfortable. They did wrong you in some way, shape, or form. But it was not deliberate. Many, many times in my office, guys, I have people coming to me and saying, this person did this to me. This person is this way. This person treats me a certain way. And when I say to them, well, this aggressor of yours, the villain, so to speak, are they happy? And the person usually replies, no, they're not. They're quite miserable. They're alone. Whatever the case. So then I say to them, well, perhaps it might be less of you they're attacking, and it might be more of the case of it's just a matter of their own unhappiness that they are sort of inflicting on the world. Because here's what happens, guys. When something bad happens to us, as it happens in everyday life, there are two ways in which we come out of it. We come out of it by saying, hey, you know something bad happened to me, and I'm going to try my utmost best to make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else. Or, hey, something bad happened to me, and because they've become a victim of what happened to them, I'm in pain, and I'm going to inflict this on everyone else. And so, a lot of times, that's what happens. People walk around and we inflict our own baggage on others. Generally, our subordinates in the work environment, for instance, or the youngsters amongst us, who are the most vulnerable amongst us, if we think about it. And so, I try to get my patients to have an idea of, you know something, it's actually not me, it's the other person, and it's their own insecurities, their own baggage, and it's not actually me they're attacking. And so as a result of that, I'm not going to take it on. I'm not going to internalize what they've said. And so is the idea of not taking it personally. That's the most, that underpins that mindset that we must walk with. And the minute that we can realize, hey, you know something? If it were somebody vaguely resembling me, if it was a cardboard cutout of me, if it was someone else entirely in the situation, this person would react the exact same way. So I'm like, you know something, if that's the case, then it doesn't make any sense me getting worked up about it. It's just that person behaving their own way. And at that point in time now, you'd have taken back your power. Which brings us now to if you were being wronged deliberately. If by your interaction with someone, you may have rubbed someone the wrong way, you may have created an enemy, so to speak, and that person seeks you out and deliberately tries to wrong you in some way, shape, or form, then the antidote to this one is taking their power away. Because make no mistake, in this scenario, you are at war. This is something that's really important. I'll give you a really, really good example of this. Almost a funny example. Where I live, we have a good community and whatnot, and there is this particularly old chap that lives sort of obliquely opposite from me. And for some weird reason, whenever he sees me, he comes outside of my yard, he comes over and he berates me about my lawn being too large and untidy, and I need to cut my lawn, although my lawn is pretty much the same as everyone else's. And I think because he's my neighbor, because he's an older man, I'm not going to get on and have mean words with him and behave badly. Obviously, I will try to be as civil as possible. He's my neighbor. And I think that he got a lot of joy from seeing me squirm. He got a lot of joy from seeing me conflicted, where on one hand, he's making me uncomfortable because he's saying things that's clearly not true. But on the other hand, I'm not going to react badly because of maybe his age, because he knows me well enough to know I'm not going to sort of be aggressive at him. And so he's deliberately wronging me. And he had great power over my heart, because when he left, I would have been very resentful, I would have been angry, I would have been upset, because, and again, I can't show this to him. And he could see it. He could make no mistake. He can read it on my face, the little flashes of conflict. But he knows I won't do anything. And so he walks away feeling satisfied that he has now exerted some power and influence over my heart. So essentially, he was a bully, so to speak. And how I deal with bullies is I tend to have fun with them. I tend to have fun with them by taking their power away. Because bullies, they have great joy in seeing the power and influence they have over each and every one that they do bully. So I came up with a plan, and then I was ready for him. So one day, I came outside. My grass was newly cut. And I came outside to my home, and I was pottering around doing some yard stuff. And then, just as he always does, he comes over to me. Hey, Roshan, you need to cut your grass, etc., etc. So I said, very, very straight face, I said, Uncle, come to the back of my home. I want to show you something. And so I walked, very serious as a heart attack. I walked over to the back of my home, and I said, Uncle, do you see how tall this grass is? Even though the grass is very short. Do you see how tall this grass is? He said, yes, it's very untidy, and I can't believe you keep your home like this. This would never fly, and I'm so disappointed in you, etc., etc. And so I said, Uncle, I'm a doctor, right? And he says, yes, I know you're a doctor, and you should know better than that. You should know better. And I said to him, yes, I'm a doctor. And because I'm a doctor, I deliberately keep my grass taller. Now, he takes a step back now, and his face, he looks very perplexed. He's like, what? Because he didn't realize this was coming. And again, very serious face, I said to him, I keep my grass deliberately long so that I can provide my family with more oxygen around my home through the taller grass. And inside I'm cracking up, but I had this very serious face on. And so he said, oh, okay, well, all right, well, I guess it makes sense. And he was at a loss for words. And he just sort of walked away scratching his head, so to speak. And since that day, he has never once came and told me about my lawn. And so the idea was that at that point, in that interaction, he had no power over me whatsoever. And if he really thought about it, it was quite an inane thing I said. I don't think it makes sense. But because I said it so seriously, using my doctorate, for instance, my medical degree, as leverage that he can't argue with, then there is no way of him now gaining back the upper hand. So it was almost like mental warfare, so to speak. But I did it in a way that was diplomatic. I did it in a way that kept the bully away, because dealing with people that wrong us is not always turning the other cheek. That's not the case at all. It's about understanding that, sometimes we have to put our hands up and give a little strike here or there, saying, hey, please don't bother me. Don't attack me. I'm not weak and defenseless. And that's what that represented. So the idea is getting ourselves to a stable enough mental, emotional space where we can actually not be bothered by the influence they have over us, and essentially take the fight to them in a relatively diplomatic way. So this helps with resentment deliberately. And this is for others. This is relatively easy compared to ourselves, because in this one, we're only trying to remedy one emotion. For ourselves, there are a couple emotions that I can identify that we have to remedy. Shame, disappointment in ourselves, and shame, disappointment, guilt. So these are the emotions that we have to remedy when it comes to forgiving ourselves. For whatever the infraction that we may have caused, these are some of the emotions. Not all, but these are the majority of them. And so as a result of that, it makes it a bit more complex. So there are two ways in which we can go about forgiving ourselves and essentially redeeming ourselves in our own eyes, which is important because others may say, no, it's okay, it was a mistake or whatever. Even if it was a mistake, others may say it's okay. But in our own eyes, in order to redeem ourselves, we have to sort of balance these emotions. And so there are two main ways that we could focus in doing this. The first way is we face the music. Essentially, we own up to whatever wrong that we may have accidentally or deliberately did. We face the person that we would have hurt in some way, shape, or form, and we ask them for their forgiveness. And we are prepared, and we are genuinely and sincerely prepared to take and face whatever consequence that comes our way. Whether we were cheating in a test, and we say to the teacher, "Ma'am, miss, I cheated in a test, I'm very sorry," whatever the consequences that may be. Whether we would have hurt someone, we would have said something unkind, facing the music, confronting that person, and asking for forgiveness is probably the easiest way to be able to redeem ourselves. Why? Because we would have opened ourselves up to the judgment of that other person and whatever consequences we have to face, whether we fail the course, whether that person, that friend who we hurt doesn't talk to us anymore, whatever the consequence of our actions are, we would have felt as if we served our time. We would have paid the price for our actions, and we can move on now relatively quickly because we have opened ourselves up to the judgment of who we hurt. The other way of doing this, if facing the music, so to speak, is not an option, then now we have to go on a journey of redemption. Redemption. This journey of redemption is a much, much, much longer process because we now have to go through the process within our own mind and heart. And as much as we would like to, these emotions, we can't reconcile these emotions very easily, especially given if the magnitude of our wrong has been a great one to necessitate us even forgiving ourselves in the first place. So this takes time. And this journey of redemption takes the form of, if I could sum it up in 2 words, it takes the form of shadow work. So, shadow work, I did an entire lecture on shadow work, but just to give a fairly quick synopsis of shadow work, it's where it's a mental emotional process that we go through where we confront and we get comfortable with the negative part of ourselves, where the part of ourselves where all of these emotions live. And by doing that, it takes us now from a place of shame, guilt, and disappointment. And by working with these emotions and trying to make the best of them, we now redeem ourselves in our own eyes. Essentially, to sum this up in a nutshell, we face the music ourselves and we work our butts off. We work extremely hard over a long period of time to redeem ourselves. Whether it means that we have to be a much better person, we have to essentially take a journey that puts us very, very far from the person that actually did that wrongdoing to initially cause these emotions. We have to work very hard to grow so much that we are far removed from that original person that did the wrongdoing to begin with. And by seeing that immense amount of personal growth through shadow work, we could then say, because I did this wrong, it put me on this journey of self-growth and self-development. And because of this wrong that I did, and because I had to work so hard to sort of forgive myself and redeem myself, I can now see the value in what happened and the journey of forgiveness. And because of that now, I am okay with it. I have redeemed myself in my own eyes. And these emotions fade. But that takes time. It takes effort. It takes diligence and persistence. It doesn't happen in a week or a month. Maybe even a year, depending on the size of the wrong that you would have done. So, but these are the way. It's either you face the music and you face external judgment and punishment, or you go within yourself and do the work itself. But this requires much more. But the consequences are less severe because the consequences here could be quite dire as well. So it's a personal choice, and one is not better than the other, for sure. So that quickly summarizes today's lecture. This part here, we talk about in a previous lecture on facing negative people and dealing with negative people. That could be very helpful in especially going to war with that person and helping to take back your power from that person. So you can check that lecture out. So that's it, guys. I hope you understand. In terms of finding forgiveness, we have to antidote certain emotions that we have within ourselves, and there are certain ways and certain pathways we can go about taking it. I can't outline the exact 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps because that's different from everyone, but I can provide a framework that one could use to be able to take their own personal situation and apply it now to this framework so that the steps that need to be taken become apparent. So I hope this lecture really helps, guys. And if there's any questions or concerns, hit me up in the comments. And if there's any other video suggestions, because this came as a result of a suggestion, hit me up in the comments as well. Until then, guys, class dismissed.